I tell you guys, man, it's getting to the point now where I'm dreading to look at the headlines. Um, when I was a kid, generally there was this gap. You look at Rocky Marciano, he was born in 1923, and most of the fighters that came after he retired were born well over a decade after he was born to 20 years after. So a lot of those guys were still relatively young at the time when I was a kid, in their 50s, early 60s, you know. So most of these guys were still around, but unfortunately, when you were in the boxing profession, especially back in those days, um, you know, the accumulation of punches, the punishment, uh, you know, Jack Dempsey was an exception to the rule. He lived to be 87 years old. Most of these guys do not have the longest lifespans. And we've been losing a lot of these guys the last 10 years, man. Floyd Patterson, Ingemar Macho Hansen, Jose Torres, uh, Emil Griffith, Joe Frazier. You know, a lot of these, we've lost a whole lot of different significant boxing figures in the past 10 years or so, you know. Ron Lyle, different people. And particularly the golden heavyweight era of the very, very late 1960s and 1970s. We lost so many of them. Ron Lyle, I mentioned Joe Frazier. And unfortunately today we lost another one, Ken Norton. Black Hercules, the fighting Marine. When we first think of Ken Norton, I mean, what we think of? We think of the guy who probably gave Ali the most fits. You know, he's the only guy other than Joe Frazier to fight Ali 3 times. Defeated Ali officially once. Even the most ardent Ali fans or fanatics would have to admit that Norton most likely beat him twice. This the third fight in 1976. Norton won. Some people think, well, you know, the fact that he didn't really go all out in that last round and Ali had the belt, you know, you had to take it from the champion. I mean, if you watch that fight, Ali, he shouldn't have won that fight. You know, come on, let's be honest. You know, Norton should have won that fight. But Norton just gave Ali fits, man, because Ali, you know, was not a body puncher. He was more a headhunter, and Norton with that very unorthodox crab-like defense. I think he would throw punches from underneath, and the rope-a-dope didn't really work well with Norton. You know, the style was just all wrong as far as Ali, you know, is concerned, as far as him being effective. And to me, I only think Ali won one out of those 3 fights, and the second one was like eked out a victory, you know. But you know, on the flip side of that, Norton had a lot of trouble with power punchers. Late in his career, when he was past his prime, a guy like Gary Cooney, Ernie Shavers, a little bit earlier than that, and probably most famously his fight with George Foreman. But hell, it was nothing to be embarrassed about. George Foreman was putting people in body bags throughout that part of his career, man. So, you know. But Ken Norton was a very, very intelligent man, too. Very cerebral. You know, and as I said earlier, he fought in the Marines. I believe he was the trying to think of the title. He was the All-Marine Heavyweight Champion, fighting the U.S. Marine Corps from 1963 to 1967. compiled 24-2 record, and he went pro in 1967. And his victory over Muhammad Ali in 1973 was very shocking. Even though he was not the first man to beat Ali, Joe Frazier having done 2 years earlier. At the same time, Joe Frazier was the champion, So even though a lot of people still believed in the Ali mystique, think he was still the same fighter that he was in 1966, 67. Now, even though Ali was still a dominant fighter, he was not quite the same fighter he was when he was 24, 25 years old. He wasn't the same. However, most people thought that Ali would have easily beaten Joe Frazier. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, now I might be wrong, I believe the fight that when he lost to Ken Norton, he was wearing the People's Champion robe that was gifted to him gifted by Elvis Presley. So, that fight was an upset. He famously broke Ali's jaw in that fight. He really was motivated to win that bout. I think he was given a motivational book by an author. I can't think of his name right now. And that just gave him the motivation to pull out one of the greatest upsets of that year. Probably the greatest upset of that year, 1973. And Ken Norton was a very, very good heavyweight. Probably a top 25 all-time heavyweight. I think I had him in my top 25 list at number 25 as far as heavyweights. Great fighter. And ultimately, he ended up being the first WBC champion when Leon Spinks declined to fight him as far as for taking the title. And the WBC declared Ken Norton champion. And his first match, his first defense of that title was against a young and upcoming Larry Holmes. And that fight still is considered one of the greatest bouts of all time. If you haven't seen that fight, it's incredible. It was a very exciting bout. But that probably was his swan song as far as being one of the top elite fighters. After that, Norton sort of went downhill as a fighter. I think he had a fight against Randall Cobb later on in his career. I think he eked out a victory, but I think at age 38, when he was knocked out by Gary Cooney, that was pretty much the end of his career. He also famously starred in cinema, movies, films, television programs. He starred in Mandingo in the mid-70s. Ali kind of made some alludes to, sort of criticized him for that role. I'm not going to go into that. But starred in 18. He was on Knight Rider. He also was initially supposed to have played Apollo Creed. And however, he backed out of that, and Carl Weathers replaced him in that role. And in 1986, he was in a terrible, terrible car accident. Terrible that he, I think initially was not expected to survive, but he did, breaking all the odds. And it left him with a slurred speech, but he recovered physically sufficiently from that. In recent years, he suffered from strokes. And this past October, he suffered a heart attack. Today, September 19th, 2013, Ken Norton died of congestive heart failure at the age of 70. And I like to say in closing that Ken Norton You're a true champion, not just in the ring, but in life. You achieved much. Your legacy is secure, and we will never forget the greatness that you brought with your craft, with your life, and with this. We all say with love, au revoir.